Welcome back to another episode of Delayed Offside. As we head down the stretch in the final parts of the season, we start getting closer to everyone's favorite, at least supposedly favorite time of the year, which is the trade deadline season. And with that, we're going to do a little reminiscing here about some of the past problematic, or actually not problematic, past popular something with a P trades that have occurred for your hockey teams in the past. I only got so much of a limited vocabulary, so we're gonna look at that. So with each of this, the guys are going to go through a little bit of reminiscing here on some of the things that they've enjoyed about some trades that their teams have made over the years that really stand out to them and as a great trade and a win for their organization. We're going to go, for me, my view anyways, counterclockwise, or actually clockwise. We'll go clockwise, and we'll go to Sunjay first to start her off.
Woo! All right, this is easy for me. So my all-time favorite trade for the Calgary Flames, it's an easy one. You go back to 2003, Roman Turk goes down, Flames need a new goaltender, and they're searching who will they get. They go to San Jose, and they trade future prospects. So not even like a draft pick or anything, just future prospects for the Sharks' third-string goalie, some young Finnish guy named Mika Kiprosov. No one even knows how to pronounce the kid's name. What happens? He comes in, shuts out Montreal his first game, and as I say, the rest is history from there. So it ended up being a second-round pick for Kiprosov, which you could argue is probably the Flames' greatest trade they've ever made. So that's pretty good.
It's a hell of a trade. Hell of a trade.
Yeah.
Pilon, what about you?
Well, I have got to go to 2015, and the Leafs traded Greg McKegg to the Florida Panthers for Zach Hyman. And I think that one's turned out quite well for the Leafs. Kyle Dubas knew Hyman quite well as he was his agent.
Did he know him well enough to say, "Hi, man"?
Yeah, see
well, how am I supposed to continue? How am I supposed to continue after that?
You're just like,
McKegg's, played a bit in the NHL here, but obviously Hyman has been an integral part to the Leafs. Any line that he's playing on has done really well this year, and he's been playing really well for quite a few years now. And that was definitely a win for Dubas.
I'm really surprised he did not go for the trading future defenseman Dougie Hamilton away for Phil Kessel. But you do you.
If we do poor trades, if we do poor trades after this,
that's different. That's different.
I have lots of poor trades to go over.
we all do.
Tuukka Rask for Justin Pogge.
Yes. Yeah.
Adam, what were you?
Mine would be in 2005, the acquisition of Chris Pronger for Eric Brewer, Doug Lynch, and Jeff Wojcicka. That was a home run hit, almost. It was caught as it was going out, right? Pronger comes in. You know what? He helps launch the Oilers to Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Finals, and then, opts to leave, even though he signed a 6-year or 5-year extension at that point. But it was huge for the Oilers then, especially at a time where they brought in Dwayne Rollison, who was a hell of a goaltender on that run. And then you have Samsonov, who was the back end guy there that was just so solid. That's the man, Spacek. It was a great team. Michael Pekka. It was tons of fun to watch, but that Chris Pronger was a huge win. And if he would have stayed, I think it would have been a bit better.
Well, hopefully your team and ours get some solid trades going down here. And with that, we'll start the pod. As always, we bring you the hot takes of the week from the hot panel here. Future Eric Francis himself, Sunjay. I just wanted to throw that out there.
Thanks a lot, Baron. I appreciate that.
Future James Myrtle burner account Ryan, and young Mark Speck Adam there, or thin Bob Stauffer, whatever you want to call it. I don't know.
Well, boys, looks like I win. We're going down the stretch here. We're going
The only really insulting one is being called Eric Francis. That's insulting.
That's the first time when I was listening to the Oilers game, the commentator was talking like that. It sounded just like the Stampede. I was like, is this the Chuck Wagons or what? Does he always mention that, or just because they were playing Calgary?
It depends. It really does.
Maybe he's trying to get an off-season job. He's like, you guys hiring Calgary Stampede?
Yeah.
The Klondike days don't pay so well in Edmonton.
Neither of them exist anymore anyway. So we're going to start things off, speaking of like things that are problematic during now times. We kind of talked last day about how Montreal Canadiens having this COVID case, if this was going to be the start of something. We're like, they had a pretty good policy. The North has been really well here. And all of a sudden, there's been a little bit of a flip where the North is actually finally getting its kicks in from COVID. And all of a sudden, the Vancouver Canucks have taken a major, major hit. Like, I can't remember the entire list here or how many people it is, but I'll try to find it while we're talking here. But essentially, their team has a mass amount of players suffering from the Brazilian variant of COVID. And this is from John Shannon today on Twitter. And it says 17 people: Travis Boyd, Jalen Chatfield, Thatcher Demko, Alex Edler, Adam Gaudetz, Travis Hamonic, Jace Harlock, Niles Hoglander, Braden Holtby, Bo Horvat, Quinn Hughes, Zach McEwen, Mark Michaels, Tyler Mott, Tyler Myers, Anton Roussel, and Brandon Sutter. So a good hunk of that team has been hit by this, and so forth, potentially families too. Some players have needed IV. Like, this has become a very, very big situation for not just the Vancouver Canucks, but actually for the NHL. What are your thoughts about where this is going to kind of lead here? What's going to happen because of this? We'll start with burner account, James Myrtle, burner account. Ryan, go ahead.
Gosh, where do we begin here? I mean, obviously, first and foremost, you have to be concerned for the players and their health and their families, right? Take hockey out of it, and this can be a serious virus to deal with, and who knows how well these players are going to be able to play coming back. I mean, we've seen the teams that have been hit with COVID so far, like Dallas and New Jersey, like they kind of struggle coming back. There's fatigue, lung damage could happen, all that type of stuff. So first and foremost, hopefully all the players have a speedy recovery and they get better soon. Now, looking at the hockey side of things, this is difficult because, I mean, with those other teams I mentioned, with the games that had to be postponed, it was still early in the season, right? They were able to spatter in some makeup games throughout the season. We're getting close to the end of the regular season. It's supposed to end May 11th. We're already into April here. As far as I know, they've postponed, 4 games? Or, yeah, 4 games were officially postponed by, obviously there's going to be more. There's going to be more because they have to be quarantined now for at least 2 weeks, I believe. And then even then, are the players going to be able to come back right after that? Or, this is half their team, right? So are these players going to be able to return to the ice? Are they going to be able to play? Is it fair for the NHL to ask them to play right after that quarantine period is done? Or should they be given some time to get their legs under them, get some practice time in first, and see how they, do with some vigorous exercise? I've also heard that they might call upon their AHL team, which also had COVID issues this season as well, right? So, you look, are they going to actually be able to play all these games that are going to be postponed? How many are going to be postponed? I just don't see the complete NHL season or all of these games actually being played this year.
So something you pointed out too, which was the AHL call up, and Utica had been hit by COVID, as you said earlier, and they're splitting and sharing that team this year, I think with Chicago or another organization. And so they actually have players from all over. So they've pulled in a goaltender from the Manitoba Moose. Like, they're pulling guys in from everywhere. They're already being called up. So that has occurred. And it's interesting, like you said, like this is probably, it sounds like, this week's already a write-off. Last week was a write-off, but you're probably looking at least another week, because stories coming out are saying that some guys are feeling better, other guys are still dealing with it, but we really don't know the long-term ramifications. And as you point out, is it likely, not even like, is it fair? Because I think they've already put this on other teams, whether it's Dallas or Buffalo. We've seen the effect of Buffalo. We've seen the early effects on Dallas, this scheduling and this changing. But is it likely at this stage, with this team being this far out, that they are going to be allowed to finish the season this year, or able to finish the season?
I don't know, because I think that the big difference is just the amount of players, right? Like those other teams had a handful of players that had COVID, but like the rest of the team could continue without some of them were star players. And I mean, that's unfortunate for the team, but at least you still had enough healthy bodies to throw out there and play a game. This is half their players and some of their coaching staff as well. Like this is a significant number of the team that is out with COVID right now. So, I mean, what are you going to throw out a team with half NHL players and half AHL players? I guess maybe you might have to. And then you look at how is this going to affect other teams? Like I believe Edmonton has 6 more games against Vancouver, Toronto 5. If all of those games are pushed towards the end of the season, I mean, is that fair for some of these teams like Edmonton, Toronto, who have playoff aspirations? Basically, they're, I don't want to say a lock for the playoffs, knock on wood over here. But, you know, are they going to be going into the playoffs playing like, you know, a hockey game like every night or every other night to make up these games? Like I would hope not. If they do, then that's a disadvantage for them, right? So although again, on the flip side, if they decide they're not going to play all these games, then it's an advantage for the Leafs and Oilers because now they have more rest going into the playoffs than that was expected.
Yeah,
Well,
sorry. It's a difficult slipper for Cinderella to try to slip into, really, because, you know, like you said, health is huge. And we've heard players like even Eddie Lack was talking about, I saw some tweets on Twitter that he had put out about how it impacted his ability to keep wind. And it is such a fast-paced physical sport that it's got to be incredibly difficult to keep that. So you got to think that they shaved games off Vancouver's regular season and maybe do like a win percentage type thing, because I just don't see them realistically finishing this season with the 56 games if they get back at it. Like it's going to be probably a week from now that they even think about bringing or adjusting that schedule back into play.
Right. And then if they do shave off some of those games for Vancouver, that means obviously some teams like Edmonton, Toronto, who have a lot of games against Vancouver, are not going to be playing the full 56 games. Are they going to then make, you know, Winnipeg and Montreal play more games than the Leafs and Oilers? Or are they going to shave off some of their games to make it even?
Who cares?
I'm going to point out this part here, which is the Montreal Canadiens schedule has been adjusted, but they, like, as much as you guys are saying, well, it's not, is it fair, blah, 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 but the Montreal Canadiens are having to pack in something like 20 some games in 30 days. And
that's true, yeah.
No one's saying, oh, that's unfair to them. Like, and it's not about really fairness. It's kind of stuck into the schedule. I think like you have to do X amount, but there's a lot of word too that players on the team are wanting to wrap up the season. Like they don't just want to sit there and be like, oh, we're done because of COVID. And I think you have to account for that part of the athletics as well. These people are kind of like they're programmed to go, right?
Well, and what happens if a team gets a COVID outbreak or a couple players on that list and it is playoff time and they are in a series? What happens to that team? What happens to their opponents? Right? What does the NHL do? Do they put that round off for a week for that team and like wait? Like this is going to bring on harder questions that need to be answered at those times if this comes up. And I wouldn't be surprised if it happens because players don't want the bubble.
No.
All right.
But what else has actually been effective? Name another thing where they had an actual COVID proof thing other than the bubble.
Vaccine.
Yeah.
But
even that,
sick. You can still get sick, Sunjay.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Like you're not going to necessarily go to the hospital, but you can
need 2 weeks to power up. Yeah, you need to power up that vaccine virtually after you get it. It's a 2-week period to build up that immunity.
But I think it still goes to the problem, which is if you want players to be safe, what's your best bet? Like, has this opened up? And I think this potentially has, but has it opened up the bubble again? Is that where this is eventually heading for that reason?
I've heard they've been talking about that, the NHL. They brought up the bubble option as something that they're going to look into.
Sponsored by Buble.
But it's also been like in their back pocket the whole time too. Like they must have known that this is a contingency plan, at least at some point, thinking that that might happen. You made the point that Buffalo like didn't have the same amount of numbers, and it's true. They had like probably half the amount, but they did have a lot of their major stars get sick when it, like Taylor Hall was sick with it. And actually some of their better players this year, like Curtis Lazar, were some of the players that got sick, and their head coach as well. But it's just been, it like the speed at which it spread through the Vancouver Canucks is crazy. And they were talking about it, I believe, on the 31 podcast, that they were saying that that's going to take a reevaluation of rules, because the rules are set up fine for regular COVID, but not necessarily for variants.
Yeah. They're going to have to look at it variant hardly. What?
Oh my God. How many puns can you throw into this episode?
You're on a roll today, man.
You can't say it's a rule if they don't make sense. Like,
he has a bet with someone as to how many puns he can throw in this episode.
yeah,
I'll toss it out in post. Don't worry about it.
Does anyone remember how many games the Habs ended up postponing, having to make up?
Well, they're already like adjusting the schedule now because of Vancouver for some of those games, right? Like the Habs are going to play, I think,
10th.
Yeah, and then I think they've changed one of the Battle of Alberta's around as well to kind of fill in those spots to make it go a little bit. But off the top, I think they only missed like 3 games.
Okay.
I think it was the series against Edmonton.
Yeah. Right. I'm just looking at Vancouver's schedule. So there's actually 6 confirmed games being postponed.
So far? Or total? Okay.
So far, yeah. Yeah, and that's going up until April 10th.
Well, the other question that comes out of this is, will the playoffs start while regular season's finishing up for certain divisions?
Yeah, that's a possibility. I mean, if the North has to finish up their regular season, all the teams down south, when they play their divisions, why not, right? Because you're not playing outside your division till the Final Four, so heck, why not just do it?
So that's odd, but I guess they could do that.
Right, but like, isn't that how the NBA goes as well sometimes?
Yeah, because they're like the bracket system, right? So, you know who your next opponent is. It's not like the reseeding that the NHL used to do, or I don't even know if they still do it anymore, but yeah, so.
Okay, so side point here. Now, we've kind of been focusing on it as a Canadian thing, because I do think to some degree, like, this is where it's really bad at the moment. But it's still, the Americans are still not immune to this any more than anything else. I don't mean American people, but the teams in America specifically. As of now, Boston has lost Halak to COVID. He's on COVID protocol, which is a little concerning because they're already down Rask. So are we thinking that there's still the possibility that we're going to be affected by this south of the border as well?
Absolutely. That's the Rask thing you want, is to lose your goalies like that.
It's your fault, because if you guys laugh,
I'm sorry,
he just
I
keeps
can't
going.
help it. It's like,
Sorry,
that was pretty good.
Sorry, I'm giving you guys a halacking.
You were like snotting out of your nose, kind of like if you had drank milk, I would have seen milk shoot out of your nose.
Oh God.
Yeah.
You know what? It's something that they need, like, the league's got to be very aware of. This is a real thing. You don't know where it's going to get. Like, it's going to get everywhere, but you have no control over how hard certain areas are going to get hit, right? And it's ultimately up to, the players. It's up to the team. It's up to the organization to take the proper precautions to keep their players safe, right? The NHL was really harping on, wear the mask. Do not pull the mask down when you're talking to the refs. Do not pull the mask down when you're talking to your players. Like, that is counterproductive to stopping the spread of COVID if you have it, right? You see them constantly. I'm like, oh my God, keep your damn mask on. Coaching staff constantly. Right? DJ Smith, what was he playing with, gum in his mouth on his hands, like throwing it into the stands the other night?
He threw it in the stands.
Yeah, ridiculous. That's now on your hand. You touch anything, your player's shoulder, anything.
I am actually surprised that they don't fine or bring mention of it in any way. Like, maybe there's an internal conversation, but it seems odd that nothing is ever mentioned about it. Like, you look at the NFL, there were some heavy heavy fines put out against coaches. Specifically, the Seahawks, I believe, were one of the teams that got nailed for their breach of COVID protocol. But you haven't heard anything with the NHL teams, and I cannot imagine that it's been perfect. I'm sorry.
It was just that one time with Washington with the players, right, getting suspended there.
That is the only incident that's occurred. You're right.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think they need to buckle down a little more on that. I think it might help a situation from twisting out of control.
It's scary though too, because like I said, the speed at which it went through Vancouver is kind of the talking point, but perhaps this is a time to reevaluate some of these protocols.
And maybe some of your PPE. Honestly, like if it gets down to that, they're wearing the cloth masks. Those are not medical grade. And those medical grade makes a difference.
Yeah, no, it's true. That is a big point that's actually taken up in the last little bit. We were talking about this a little bit earlier, which was a couple of big names had kind of received some big fines for their behavior in the NHL this last little bit. Connor McDavid for a legal check to Kotkaniemi, and Nathan McKinnon for trying to give a guy back his helmet. So I know that there were some different opinions here, and I know we talked a little bit about doing it like a court case, so maybe we'll just work that way up there and go that way. Pilon, I know you have strong feelings on this. So Adam, you're going to tell us why Connor McDavid wasn't a suspension, and Ryan can tell us why it was. And then afterwards, Ryan, you can tell us why McKinnon, your choice, if you want to do why he should have been fined or why he shouldn't have been fined, you can pick, and then Sunjay can kind of try to fight the way through it. But this is our court case.
Sunjay, did you have really strong feelings about this at all?
About the McKinnon one, I could argue that one. But
Not McDavid?
But McDavid, obviously he should be suspended, fined. He's a menace.
Save it for the court. Save it for the court.
Only reason I'm asking is my stance has lessened. So if Sanjay's super for McDavid being suspended, maybe he should do it. But
shut up.
Yeah, that's fair. If you want to do it that way, if you want to represent, if you feel that Ryan is unable to represent the plaintiff properly,
I can have fun and represent the arguing side for it.
You can still argue for.
Okay. I'll argue for it, but like my stance has lessened. But
all right, you go for it. I'll do the McKinnon one.
All right, Adam is starting on the defense.
Yeah, you know what? I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, Your Honor.
If my lawyer sounds like you, I have no confidence. I'm sorry. I'd be like, I screwed up.
Sounds like Quimby.
Like you sound like the guy who sells newspapers in a 1920s New York show. That's what I'm hearing there.
I'm watching too much Law and Order.
Watching Newsies again, and it's getting inspirational. I can see it happening. That Disney Plus.
First thing first. First point. The point of contact was the chest, as you can tell. That makes it a legal move in the NHL. As you can see, Connor comes around, goes over top, hits, and comes back up because the momentum that Kotkaniemi has going forward pushes McDavid a little off edge. His elbow comes up, and ultimately we need to look at the dive that Kotkaniemi took when McDavid...
You can no longer make fun of me for defending Matthew Tkachuk from now on.
I'm not finished. Number 2. Until this league protects its star players, this kind of behavior is going to pop up. If he gets another fine for that, you will see my ass back in court. Same time, same place. Amen.
All right. The judge points to order. Prosecution, you may proceed.
All right.
Objection.
Your Honor. I will go over some of the points that I've seen against McDavid being suspended. Number one that I've seen a lot of Oiler fans say, as well as sportscasters, is the fact that McDavid had to deal with a lot of non-calls against him. And because of that, he's allowed to do this for basically is what they were saying. That's not an excuse. That's a motive. You're giving a motive as to the reason why he was frustrated. Again, bunch of penalties being committed against him, not being called, getting him frustrated, and then he decides to take it out on Kotkaniemi. That does not give him the excuse to do so. Now, should the penalties against him have been called? Absolutely. They should have been called. But does that change the fact that what McDavid did was dirty and illegal? No, it does not. So, it'd be just like saying, Adam, if someone, you were walking home someday and some guy jumped you and knocked you silly a bit and he got away scot-free. And then the next time you saw him, you took a baseball bat and broke both of his legs. Do you think that, you pleading to the police that, it was fair for you to do so is going to work? No, it's not going to work. So anyways, that's not a great...
Thank you.
Yeah.
I just want to say something to all you
Point of order. Sit
My-
down. I will have order in my court. You, sir.
My
bailiff,
co-prosecutor
remove
would
this
like to
man.
speak now.
Remove this
I would just
man.
like to say something to you Oiler fans out there and your Oiler teammates out there. Who is protecting McDavid? McDavid is getting hit. He's getting tripped. He's getting slashed. Who's out there on the Oilers that are protecting him? He's obviously not going to drop the gloves himself, which is fair enough. So who on Edmonton is sticking out? Where's Nurse? Where's Cassian? Where's all these big guys that I've been hearing about? Like, why isn't one of them, some guy comes in, chops McDavid? Why don't they say, all right, you hit McDavid, we're dropping the gloves, we're going?
They'd be doing
they
it
got to
5
go in
times
and
a
do
game.
that.
They'd be doing it 5 times a game. And Connor's like taking it into his own hands. Like, you see when that happens, like guys come on, like they put Cassian on with him and guys don't mess. Like they put Cassian on right after that incident with him for the rest of the game. So he had the 2 big bodies. No, if anyone goes after McDavid like that and it's malicious, guys jump in. Right? It's the missed calls. It's the ref's fault that they're missing these blatant calls. Even today's game, like he was blatantly tripped on a entrance into the zone. He passed a couple players, tripped, stick to the skates.
Look Pilon's face. Just
Yeah. I'm not going to argue that. And we talked about the reffing last episode. Like the reffing is terrible. And I think the issue is
order. Continue.
Objection.
I just want to say McDavid
has.
has had, I think it's like the second most penalties called for, like he's drawn the second most penalties in the league. So they are calling penalties against him. But the problem is every time McDavid is out there, there's a chance that someone's going to commit a penalty against him. And the problem with the reffing is they manage the game. So they're not going to call every single penalty against him, unfortunately.
And get rid of the rule
with it. I don't agree with it, but that's just how it is.
Yeah.
But I mean, this happens to all-star players, not just McDavid.
Yeah,
but only in the
right.
NHL.
You're going to say that get rid of the rule book, but I would argue that this has happened because they already have put away the rule book, and those things are occurring. But let's move on to case number 2 because I don't want to just focus on stuff we've already talked about a little bit. Case number 2, our defendant is Nathan McKinnon. He is charged with assault with a weapon using in the form of a helmet against. I want to say, was it Connor Garland? Who did he throw it
No,
at?
it was Mikhail Granlund, wasn't it?
No.
It was
Clayton
against
Keller?
Arizona, wasn't it?
No, it
Yeah,
wasn't
it was
Keller. It was
against-
Granlund.
Granlund doesn't play for Arizona.
Or was it Garland then?
Garland, maybe. Anyways, edit this out, Sunjay.
No, this is all staying in.
Yeah, it doesn't really matter. Anyways, so McKinnon charged with assault against a member of the Arizona Coyotes, who we care so little about that we couldn't even remember the name of.
In a playoff spot right now.
So are you defending or going against him, Sunjay?
Oh, I'm going to go against him. Like, this is ridiculous. Throwing a helmet?
Hold up. We just want to know who you're going to go against. Adam, Ryan, who wants to take it?
Doesn't matter.
Let
I'm here.
Adam continue to defend the guilty.
Defend the guilty. Okay, Adam,
Defending all the
defense.
superstars of the NHL.
It's just because of that money. That's why he does it.
We'll let Sunjay present his case first. Go ahead.
I need my retainer.
Yeah, I mean, we've all seen the video, and you can make light of it. It is kind of a little bit humorous, but there could have been major injuries to this. Like the guy takes the helmet, which is not a light piece of equipment, and he throws it at the guy. The guy doesn't have his helmet on. Like if this had been a stick or a puck or something, like if he had flipped a puck at him, that's just totally, irresponsible and shouldn't be done. But he had the helmet and he threw it at him. That could have caused injury, man. And you got to control yourself. And the score was like 8-3 for Colorado, and he's pulling stunts like that. That's just kind of, I don't know. I think that's kind of Bush League, man. Like McKinnon's one of the best players in the league. He shouldn't be doing that kind of stuff. He should be, I didn't see the game. I don't know what spurred it on, but you shouldn't be throwing your helmet at someone. That's just ridiculous, man.
That was against Connor Garland.
That was against Connor Garland. Yeah.
Yeah.
So don't throw your helmet, man. Like, think about if this was like a minor hockey league game or something. Like, this is just ridiculous. This guy is the top of the league. You shouldn't be pulling stunts like this.
Defense, your case.
Well, Your Honor, let the record show that there was an asterisk in that argument about flipping a puck at him. Let's look at Case Muzzin versus Matthew Tkachuk. The end.
You totally just derailed the whole season, Muzzin. Jerk.
Anyways, as both of my defendants have been beaten down, and that earlier the night before, McKinnon had gone bowling. He had his 10-pin bowling ball. It was pretty heavy. He wanted to just toss him his helmet. He told me, but it came down like he was going for a hard strike to win the series. And who do you think you are? I am.
It's nice of you to defend the best hockey player in the league today, Adam.
Both of them. The number 1 and the number 5 in McKinnon.
All right. Well, we haven't settled anything here. In fact, we've done nothing for about 10 minutes. So you can let us know what you think about this. But yeah, this segment was
let us know what you think about Adam's accent. Do you like it?
What do you think you are?
For a whole episode?
I didn't know gangsters became defense lawyers.
Yeah, like I said, he sounds like a 1920s or 1900 like New Yorker, like you Bugsy, like
slowly degrading into
you're
the Simpsons.
Friends with a lawyer, like does he talk like that? No, where does that come from?
Yeah.
So I'll just tell. That's
I liked it. It was
next
good.
time we see him, we'll say like that's what you sound like, right?
Yeah.
So let's talk about the big event that's occurring, because it's really the next big event in hockey circles, which is trade deadline. And trade deadline is always a little bit of an exciting time, because we always think something big is going to happen, and almost universally nothing big happens. And then we're disappointed either in our teams, either in the NHL, either in TSN or Sportsnet for hyping it up and it being a kind of a blowout gong show. But it's usually still an exciting time, because we are allowed to dream and hope that things will get better, and that maybe this will be the piece that gets us that sweet run, that 06 style run, or 04 style run, or 1967 style run. whatever it is, whatever you dream about.
1967, such a good year.
In fact, but anyways, that's beside the point. But let's talk about this. So trade deadline's coming up. The first real move that has occurred has been Eric Staal being traded out of the den de la Sabres, purgatory Buffalo, to the Montreal Canadiens, where today he scored the game-winning goal in overtime against the Oilers to Edmonton, and kind of, like, he's already paying some dividend after getting through that 7-day quarantine. What are we thinking is going to happen here? Do we feel like Canadian teams are going to make a splash? Do we feel it's going to be a big day? Let's start with that. Like, what are our expectations for this trade center?
I think that the expectations need to be at an all-time low, especially with what trade centers have been in recent years, the history of them. Like you said, it's been something everyone really looks forward to, and ultimately it lets you down. If you're looking for a big trade deadline this year, April Fools, there's not going to be much. There's not, due to the 7-day quarantine that players have to go through. I just don't think teams are willing to take those kind of risks and wait on it, especially with the season, coming to an end so quickly.
But don't you feel like the teams that are at the top have kind of given themselves that wide berth now, that they could start waiting and like be willing to sacrifice and pad things in there?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, they wouldn't be giving up any assets to wait for the players anyways, right? Like, any assets that are playing right now would probably be all picks and prospects that they're giving up. So, if you're Toronto, you can be like, okay, here's your first. We'll trade it for Sam Bennett. You don't even have to go through quarantine. But if you're trading with an American team, it'll be all picks and prospects that you're trading away if you're a top team. So, you can wait the 2 weeks because, hey, as you said, you have that cushion, and it's not like anyone's subtracting from your roster.
Ryan, what do you think is a bigger deficit towards trading this year? Is it the salary cap, which is basically stuck in limbo, not growing, or is it the threat of COVID and the quarantine period for making players potentially cross the border? What do you think is the biggest deficit?
Between those two, I would go with COVID. Number one, in terms of, are some players going to want to cross the border and have that quarantine? Number two, are owners going to be wanting to, do they, have the pockets to spend more money? I would hope if you're a contending team, with Stanley Cup aspirations, your owners would be willing to add some more dollars to the roster, but you never know. I also think there's one other thing that might limit trades, and that's with the Seattle draft coming up, right? So, like, I know Kyle Dubas has mentioned that he is looking specifically for players that are going to be free agents next year, because you're going to make this trade for a player, and then all of a sudden, you might lose them to Seattle, or you might have to protect them, and then you lose another player. It just kind of makes things a little more complicated. And the flat salary cap is another issue too. Like, because I'm a Leaf fan, I'm just going to keep bringing it back to Toronto. But I know next year, Hyman and Anderson, their contracts are both coming up, right? So, are the Leafs going to want to bring on a player with additional years left on their contract? Probably not, because they need that cap space. The cap's not going up, and if they're going to want to pay Hyman the big dollars to stay with the team, they're going to need that space. And other teams are going to be in that same boat.
I don't know if you listened to that podcast. I think it was the DFO podcast or whatever with Sarah Valley and Gregor that I sent, where when Drager was on it today, and he made the comment about Hyman leaving the Leafs and signing with the Oilers. Oh my God. So
I have not listened to it. I'm not sure if I want to now.
I would love that.
You should. It's great. It's like they literally have all the insiders from TSN on it, and they fire out a lot of different things. It's really quite good. So looking at, here's some kind of big names. I think you made some really good points there, Ryan, but some big names on the list, and this is TSN's list, their trade board, if you will. David Savard's number one at $4.25 million. Then Kyle Palmieri, 4.65. Taylor Hall at 8. Nick Foligno at 5.5. Jonathan Bernier at 3. Luke Glendening, 1.8. Mikael Granlund, 3.75. Toronto's top prospect, whoever the hell that is, Scott Lawton, Matthias Ekholm, Josh Manson, and then it goes into Chicago's cap space is number 12. Very sexy. Chris Drieger, Brandon Montour, Alex Goligoski, Vince Dunn, Ryan Murray, Bobby Ryan, Colin Miller, and Ryan Dzingel wrap up the top 20. Out of the list, which guy or guys do you feel is the most likely to move, and who do you think is going to be left dancing by themselves in this thing?
I think there's been enough smoke behind Taylor Hall that he might get moved at deadline. Another thing is, you've kind of heard throughout the season about Nick Foligno as well. And I've kind of been following those stories a bit more, because the Oilers could use a stronger left wing. So those are guys that kind of interest me. But because I've heard more about them, I think maybe there's some truth, especially with the Hall. He wants to win now.
Ryan Sunjay?
No.
I've heard a lot of teams wanting Palmieri, specifically Boston being one, and New York Islanders with Anders Lee being injured. And he's probably the top forward, I would say, on this list. So I think he's going to be the one that the teams are pining for to get into their lineup.
And he's played for Lamoriello, has he not? Under Lamoriello
probably
in New Jersey,
he might have.
Or was Lamoriello gone at that point?
I'm not sure. I can't tell you.
I mean,
don't ask me questions like that. I don't know.
Hey, I'm going to ask you them like Lou Lamoriello.
So did Taylor Hall play with Jordan Eberle back in Edmonton days? Because that could be a nice fit. The Islanders look like they're always in there. They have probably the cap space. I don't imagine they're up against the cap. They could probably afford Taylor Hall. That would be a spot I could see him adding, bringing a little bit offense to that team.
So one of the things pointed out in that podcast that I was talking about earlier was the fact that certain teams had kind of been, actually it might have been from the 31 podcast, which was certain teams had kind of been the focal point of, it was definitely 31 thoughts, had been the focal point of trade speculation, specifically teams like Nashville, the Sharks, and can't remember what the other one was, but Arizona. And these teams have started to actually emerge and put themselves in the playoff hunt. And while Nashville's in the hunt, then a team which had a ton of guys who were potentially available no longer does. Well, Arizona's in it. They're not moving anybody. And the Sharks now, because they have a chance, same thing. So with those three teams being removed from that specific spot, what is who are the most likely trade teams here? Who are the teams that are going to be getting rid of players? We'll go reverse order this time. We'll say, Sonny, you can kick it off first.
Yeah, the Calgary Flames. That's just an easy one, man. They've sort of tailspinned here the last little bit, and I think they have a lot of players that could be interesting to teams. You look at players like Sam Bennett. Don't look at his regular season. Look at his playoff numbers. His playoff numbers are phenomenal. And so anyone that thinks they're a contender is like, hey, maybe we just need that extra 2-3 goals of playoff series. Sam Bennett can provide that. So I think he's a choice that he could be up there. David Rittich, you mentioned Boston needing a goalie. He's shown in the past what he can do, and he could be a reliable backup. So you got him. And, Derek Ryan, he's a good penalty killer, fourth line player. You need those kind of players in the playoffs because, as you know, playoffs is a war of attrition and a lot of injuries occur. So, yeah, those players, even like a Stone could be like an insurance policy as like a 7th, 8th defenseman if you ever need him in there. So I think Calgary, could be moving 4 players. Now, will they? Probably not. But I think Brad Treliving, the GM, is calling and he's saying, hey, what do you want for these guys? Are you interested in this guy? I think he's working the phones pretty hard this week.
So I just want to make a point of something you said, which was Dave Rittich being up in trade speculation. And he has been, specifically because I think he's a UFA, or is he RFA?
Yeah, no, UFA.
He's UFA. And he's been connected to Washington, and he's also been connected to Toronto. So I guess I'll ask you this question, Ryan. If that is the guy that they target as their third string or as their backup, potentially, depending what's going on with Anderson, are you comfortable with that as your solution?
He wouldn't be my top choice, but I mean, if they had to get him, if he was like the last remaining option, I'd rather have him
low,
than.
Hey?
Wow.
Well, I just think there's better options. Like I've heard they've been talking to Buffalo about Linus Ullmark. Jonathan Bernier would be a great option out of Detroit. He's had a fantastic year with Detroit on a very bad Detroit team. I'd take him over Rittich. I would take potentially Antti Ranta. I know he's had some injury history, but he's had a decent year. I really, really wish that Darcy Kemper wasn't hurt. Oh my God, I would have loved if they could have got him. So, I mean, there are some better options than Rittich, but if Rittich is the last available option, I still prefer having him a healthy goalie in the lineup than Freddie Anderson, who is yet to return. If he's not healthy to go, and I mean, Campbell has been playing fantastic, but he's still playing through injury as well. So, there's cause for concern there. Are you going to go into the playoffs with 2 injured goalies and, and your third string? Like, I don't know. I'd prefer to grab someone as a safety net if need be. I think this week is going to be huge for the Leafs in terms of, are they going to go after a goalie or not? We're going to need to see if Freddie Anderson comes back and can get into a game or two. If he can't, then they just need to find a goalie, and because they can't go into the playoffs with that question mark in net.
Okay, but who else do you think is going to make is going to sell now that some of these teams have found themselves back in the hunt again? What other teams are you thinking are going to sell?
Well, I mean, the number one team I would think is going to sell is the Buffalo Sabres. Obviously, they're not going to be making the playoffs. So, I mean, we've already talked about Taylor Hall. I mean, the issue is I'm just looking at the roster. They don't have a lot of guys that are coming up as UFA next year that people would be really interested in. Brandon Montour, maybe they could get something for him. What are they going to get for Taylor Hall is what I'm really curious about. Like, are they going to get a first-round pick and a good prospect just based off his name recognition? I mean, he hasn't had a great year this year, but no one on Buffalo has. Maybe he can be forgiven for that, but he really wasn't that great last year either. So, I don't think they're going to get as much for Hall as they would hope for. So, for a team that's one of the worst teams in the league, or no, they are the worst team in the league right now, right? They have to be. I don't know how many assets they're going to be able to sell off and bring back in. But I think they're going to be trying.
Adam,
I'm curious to see. I'm curious to see a team like the Columbus Blue Jackets. It seems like they're in kind of a state of purgatory, and they have been for a while, ever since kind of Panarin and Bobrovsky took off. So, it doesn't seem to look like too much has panned out, or they have got what they hoped for out of Laine. We'll see. That remains to be seen. Like, it may take him a season to gain the chemistry he needs with the line mates he's working with, but it just doesn't seem like players are happy there. So is it a complete turnover? You see Max Domi, he's like, there was gruff about him taking off the Columbus Blue Jackets off his Instagram account or something like that. Like, there's weird things going on with Foligno's name out there, who's been like a lifetime Blue Jackets namestay. So it'll be interesting to see for me what they do.
No, that's fair. That's fair.
One name that's on that board I find very interesting is Chris Driedger for Florida. Why? Like, it doesn't make sense to me. Why would a team that is doing very well this year and you're in the playoffs get rid of the goaltender who's helped you get to this point? Because it hasn't been Bobrovsky.
No, that's fair. But they have so many goalies in their system coming up. That is a huge part of it. Like, they have Spencer Knight coming up. They have who's going to cost less because he's going to be on an entry-level contract. They got the guy from Team Canada. Like, those are a lot of players coming up in that system. So I think that
he's just trying to sell high on him now.
Well, how are you going to get out of? You're not going to get out of Bobrovsky, right? Like, that's kind of the problem. Like, you are stuck with that contract for a little while.
No, you are. But like, he's a UFA next year. Like, I mean, if I was Florida, I would hold on to him and worry about your upcoming goalies next year. Unless they just don't feel that they're actually going to make a splash in the playoffs and they don't really have a shot at it, then I guess go for it.
They're first in the league right now, so I mean, they'd be crazy to give up so early.
It'll be interesting, actually, come playoffs, what'll happen around them and how they're going to run things, right? Like, you're probably going to run with the guy that's getting you there, Yeah. They have a good chance to go far this year.
Well, they do. Yeah, I just don't get it. Like, I've been hearing, we were talking about goalies the Leafs could go after, and I heard his name, which would be awesome. But to me, that just doesn't make sense. But who knows?
I think the other thing is in the flat cap, it really has to make sense financially. And that is going to be tricky for a lot of teams, because if you're not making enough money, are you really going to want to hold on to salary? Like, dollars in, dollars out seems to be a common theme this year. You're hearing that a lot. And even if you guys, like, if Toronto decides they want to grab a goaltender, they still got to give up something, right? Like, they have to give up something more than probably just a pick, but something of roster space to help balance those things.
Oh, absolutely. Out. Yeah, that's what they'll have to do. Like, unless they put Anderson on LTIR, then that'll create the dollars for a goalie. Otherwise, you're sending out Freddie.
So we're going to switch on to Ryan's favorite subject here, which is the Toronto Maple Leafs. And we've kind of covered this a little bit today, but what are the thoughts on the goaltending situation? Is this the major thing to be addressed by this team, or should there be other spots that they should be looking at to fix?
Well, there are other spots that they need to look at to fix, but as I mentioned, goaltending.
Tell us all.
Well, I still think a third line center. So, I mean, last episode I talked about how, their top six was looking great once Galchenyuk got in there, and he was looking good. That zip line was looking great. And I thought, oh, maybe they're good for forwards. But then Thornton faltered. He's been pushed down now, the lineup. And now Hyman's been put into that top line spot. And then that zip line just went to shit. He was the driving force behind that line. And without him there, it's just not the same. So, you have Engvall or Kerfoot as options as the third center, and I'm just not entirely comfortable with either of them going into the playoffs. And if I had a choice, I would upgrade at the 3C spot. I'd really like a Nick Foligno there. Someone like, the thing that the Leafs need is someone who can bring some physicality. They're not a physical team, and they need help on the PK. So he would check off both those boxes. Plus, he provides more offense than Kerfoot at this point of the season. I think he would be an upgrade over Kerfoot. that would mean Kerfoot would have to go out in the trade. Like I like Kerfoot probably better than Engvall, but salary, the dollars for those reasons, Kerfoot would be the one shipped out. So that's forward. But in terms of goaltender, so I already talked about how great Campbell's been. 951 save percentage, 2 shutouts, 8-0 record. He's going for the Leafs record for 9-0 start, which is held by Felix Potvin. He's going for that record today to tie it. So, I mean, he looks like he could be the legit starter. But again, how healthy is he? Can he stay healthy? And it's still a small sample size. Is this just a flash in the pan thing, or can he do this consistently?
Well, sorry.
No, go ahead.
There's been a lot of talk around the fact that if after he plays a game, he does not practice the next day.
Because he's battling through injury. He's not healthy.
But he hasn't been healthy yet. And so as much as great as those numbers are, are you in a playoff series? Are you going to really want your 1B or your number 2 to have to play a game because he's lingering a little bit?
That's it. Can he get healthy? It hasn't shown on the ice. The thing with Freddie when he was playing, it was noticeable that he was hurt. It was very, very noticeable. It hasn't shown that way for Campbell, but he is battling through something. If it gets worse and all of a sudden he's out, then you're needing your backup goalie. Who is that going to be? Can it be Freddie Anderson? We're going to find out. If he comes back, he gets in some games, he looks like old Freddie, great. But the clock's ticking here. So I think goaltending is a scary situation for the Leafs. You got 2 injured goalies. Michael Hutchinson's played well in, the times he's been called upon, but he makes me nervous because of last year. So, I think goaltending is going to be something that they'll need. And then defense as well. I could see them maybe keeping an eye open for some sort of depth defenseman, because right now, if they lose any defenseman to injury, the guys they're calling upon are like Rasmus Sandin and Timothy Liljegren, who haven't even played an NHL game yet. So, there's definitely some spaces there that the Leafs need to address.
One of the other conversation pieces has been around Galchenyuk and how his reemergence since entering the Toronto organization, which, given that he has kind of struggled with several other organizations, he's only has 1 goal in this time, but there seems to be a lot of love around him as part of this team. So what are people seeing about Galchenyuk now that's all of a sudden rewritten the story on his career here?
Well, the number one thing I would say is he brings some physicality to the Leafs roster. He's getting on the forecheck. He's a big body. That was one thing I was excited about them bringing him on, is, like I've said, that's something the Leafs need in their lineup. And he's almost, I don't say he's a Hyman type, but he's playing that role on that line and he's doing it very well. And yeah, he just scored his first goal. So he just has the 1, but he does have 4 points in 8 games. I mean, that's pretty good for a second line wing, man. And then possession wise, you look at the advanced analytics, very, very good with that line. And so, again, small sample size. And, I was really high on Jimmy Vesey at the start of the season with his small sample size. So, I'm not willing to say hey, yeah, he's our man for sure, but he's looked good. And so if he can continue that type of play on that second line, I think that's what they were looking for. And I read a really interesting article from, I believe it was The Athletic, where the Leafs really took their time with Galchenyuk. They brought him in. They had injuries on their roster, and they could have just plugged him into their lineup right away, but they didn't. They sent him down to the AHL. They had him work with their skating coach. They gave him some time to find his game and dominate in the AHL. He did really good down there. And then they brought him up. So they took their time with him and really worked on his game and his mental state, and brought him in when he was ready. And so far it's showing. So
it's funny that you mentioned earlier Jimmy Vesey, because I'll say a lot of the Toronto people I followed for the longest time are like, oh yeah, Keith has unlocked Vesey. Oh yeah, see, look how great this is. And then waivers gone to Vancouver, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you have to wonder if this is just a little bit of that again. Are we thinking this is going to be sustainable, or given the fact that he's been in other organizations, Pittsburgh, Pittsburgh, Arizona, Montreal, is it Ottawa, is it something that is potential to drop off again, or that we should expect to drop off?
Well, that potential is always there for sure. I mean, he was a consistent 20 goal man for a number of years before the move to Pittsburgh, and then his game just went to the shits, and I don't know why it did, but it did. So I'm like he definitely has the skill, right? He has the goal scoring touch, he has the skill, and like I said, he has that big body and physicality that he can bring. So and from what I've read about him, from what the other players are saying, he's bringing a great attitude too. So, but who knows? Like I said, I was really high on Jimmy Vesey at the start of the year, and then that didn't really turn out so well. So, I'm hoping that he's the answer in that second line spot. But the thing is when they're looking at bringing in a forward for like that 3C spot, which is where I think they need to be, like. It'd be good for to bring in someone who can always move into that lineup in that spot beside Tavares and Nylander if need be too, right? Someone who can play both wing and center, just in case.
That's something that you need to look at too. Honestly, who's Galchenyuk playing with? Playing with Tavares and Nylander, and they've got great chemistry. They're really good players. You could argue that they're elite. And what's Galchenyuk? I would argue with you, Ryan, that he is not a goal scorer's touch. 1 goal in 8 games does not garner that for me. And I think in the past, even with the 20-goal seasons, like he's too dependent on someone else putting him on his back to play, I think. I think you put him on a lesser line, anywhere out of that top 6, he's lost.
Oh yeah, because that's not his game. Like he is not a defensive-minded player, right? And so if you're playing in the bottom 6, you need to be able to bring a more of a defensive mindset to it, right? Because you're usually being matched up to try to shut down lines for the most part, and that's not his game, not at all. Like he needs to be in that top 6, or else he can't play, right? And that was my concern when they first brought him in was, if he's not going to score you goals, what is he going to do? So I mean, he's only scored the 1, but still 4 points is good, right? 4 points in 8 games. Like I'll take the assists if that's what he's going to give you. Hopefully he'll provide more goals and hopefully he's a mainstay feature on that top 6 in Toronto, but we will see.
It's just a little bit of breaking news, and by the time you watch this pod, it will not be breaking news. But the Vancouver Canucks are now at 20 players positive, including taxi squad and
coaching staff.
Yeah, so you're starting to see that spread is still increasing. So that likelihood of that season, at least getting those games in right away, is not going to happen. So it does bring one more question, which is, does that also take them out as a trade candidate?
Good question.
It's unattractive for sure for other teams. Do you want to put your team at risk by bringing in a player from the Canucks that possibly still has the virus and could, eventually put that in your club?
I think there's a set amount of quarantine days you have to have after it. Like you're not allowed to leave until you are like X amount of days after having signs.
Right. But how are those players going to be when you actually bring them? Like once their quarantine's done, they're good to go. But like how good are they going to be? Right. Are they going to be back to their old selves, or is there going to be some lingering effects? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And like you look at, I'm just looking at their roster, like guys who like they would potentially try to trade, like Brandon Sutter. Like, does he have it? Is he on the list? Brandon Sutter?
Yeah, I think he was.
Yeah, he was.
Jimmy Vesey, I think he was.
He was not.
No?
I didn't see his name.
Alex Edler?
Yes, he was on the list.
And like Alex Edler was probably the guy who was going to get the Canucks the biggest return, I would say. Mm-hmm. I don't see that happening now. So I mean that sucks for the Canucks organization too, because obviously they weren't going to make the playoffs this year. It would have been nice to bring in some picks and prospects and continue building for the future. And if you're not going to be able to do that by getting rid of some of your expiring contracts, that sucks.
For a safe recovery for everyone, and that they're healthy again and back at it. And hopefully you guys get to complete the season. With that, I'm Baron.
I'm Adam.
I'm Ryan.
And I'm Sunjay.
It has been Delayed Offside. Like, click, subscribe, send us tweets, make comments below, check out all the videos, and have yourself a lovely day.